Kennedy never stopped growing, and it was his exposure to new problems that accounted for much of that growth. Before he toured West Virginia and Southern Illinois and other poverty-stricken areas of the United States in the course of his campaign for the presidency, he had never seen Americans forced to live under such conditions. And it touched him, it moved him deeply, and he was determined to do something about it as president. Similarly, his experiences had never exposed him to the kind of brutal treatment of blacks which he learned as president was being meted out to many of the black citizens in the South and elsewhere. And that moved him, and he was determined that something had to be done about it.
During Kennedy's first year, the main challenges had been in foreign affairs. Now, they came from within the nation itself. For more than 100 years, refused the rights and opportunities enjoyed by other Americans, black citizens were demanding that the United States at last live up to the guarantees of the Constitution. Blacks would no longer ride at the back of the bus. From across the South and elsewhere came daily reports of marches, confrontation, and riot.
The Civil Rights Revolution was underway. John F. Kennedy didn't start that revolution, but neither could he have stopped it had he wanted to. It was underway in the streets of the country, particularly in the South. It was aided by young people, North and South, who felt that the time had come for America to make good on its promise of equal opportunity. Each year of his presidency found John F. Kennedy more committed and more concerned on this issue. Until late 1962, he committed the full majesty of the federal government to see to it that a black man, James Meredith, was admitted to the University of Mississippi, no matter how many mobs or rioters tried to stand in his way.
The general belief was that there would be a terrible violence. I never really believed that there would be, but that was generally prevailing thought.
But the violence came. When it was over, it left a stalemate, tense and silent, in which a single spark might again cause an explosion.
Americans are free, in short, to disagree with the law, but not to disobey it. For any government of laws and not of men, no man, however prominent or powerful, and no mob, however unruly or boisterous, is entitled to defy a court of law. If this country should ever reach the point where any man or group of men, by force or threat of force, could long deny the commands of our court and our Constitution, then no law would stand free from doubt.
The soldiers left at the end of the first year. They stayed 1 year. The marshals stayed the entire time. There was never a time on the campus where I was not accompanied by marshals.
Both by his individual actions and speeches as president and by the legislative program that he sent to Congress, President Kennedy, for the first time in history, placed the presidency at the front of that civil rights march and declared that hereafter neither legally nor morally could racial segregation and discrimination take place in the United States.
As black leaders such as Martin Luther King rallied a nationwide campaign, Kennedy asserted the full authority of the federal government for equal rights.
I come over here tonight to tell you that you are God's children, and that every man from a base black to a treble white is significant on God's keyboard. I come over here to let you know.
For the first time, violent racists and bigots and those who supported them by passive assent were on the defensive. At Lincoln Memorial, King voiced the anguished hope of a century of denial.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. I have a dream. My poor little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. When all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
There was another dream undimmed by hatred or bigots, but only in the wild inventions of Jules Verne and other fantasists had men imagined traveling to distant planets. Less than half a century had passed since such a feat seemed remotely possible, but the technological demands and the cost seemed prohibitive until the Soviets placed a man in orbit. Quickly, Kennedy pledged to put a man on the moon. The race for space was on.
I've spoken about the new frontier. This is not a partisan term, and it's not the exclusive property of Republicans or Democrats. It refers instead to this nation's place in history, to the fact that we do stand on the edge of a great new era, filled with both crisis and opportunity, an era to be characterized by achievement and by challenge. It is an area which calls for action, and for the best efforts of all those who would test the unknown and the uncertain in every phase of human endeavor. It is a time for pathfinders and pioneers.
Godspeed, John Glenn.
Ignition.
He was responding to a challenge at that time. We had been very proud in this nation that we were the preeminent nation in the world in engineering, science, things technical. We had provided rising standards of living all throughout our history. And it seems to me that if there was one spirit that sort of imbued the whole Kennedy years, it was that feeling of excitement, of excellence, that we can do better, and we're going to set goals, we're going to go for it. And the whole country was sort of excited about that.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. No single space project in this period will be more impressive to mankind or more important for the long-range exploration of space, and none will be so difficult or expensive to accomplish. But in a very real sense, it will not be one man going to the moon. It will be an entire nation.
For untold centuries, man had looked outward into the heavens. Now, for the first time, returning astronauts could look inward toward the small planet that was home to the wayward and contentious creature called man. Threatened now by nuclear apocalypse, it seemed inexpressibly valuable. Hanging in the darkness of space, it shone bright as springtime, pretty as an apple on a tree.